This is what I do every day, and I like doing it. So I like doing these type of things because I want to be able to share the joy of what I do for a job. Product management is a very unique job, and there's not a lot out there about how to be a product manager. There's things like product school, but I take every opportunity I can to share what it's like to be a product manager. So who am I? My name is Will. I work at Amazon. I work on a product called Customer Reviews. Some of you might know about that product. A lot of people know about that product. I came to this product specifically because it's a relevant product. I worked on something previously that I thought wasn't quite as relevant. It was really cool, but not as relevant. So this is what I do now. And my main focus is actually promoting trust in customer reviews. So has anyone here heard of a fake review? Unfortunately, a lot of people. That's my job. So I try to build systems, strategies, and policies that make reviews on Amazon trustworthy. And I would say it's the hardest problem that I've ever worked on, and I've worked on some hard problems. So that's what I do in my 9 to 5. What I'm going to do today is tell you how to build the product that your customers want. I work at Amazon where people really care about customers, but this is something that all product managers do. The customer is the king always. And if you build a product that they want, your business will likely be successful. So as you leave here today, my goal is to give you a crash course. So like if I got hit by a bus one day or something, or I couldn't show up to work, you could come in my place and do part of my job. So I'll do my best. All right, this is a really brief overview of what we're going to do today. I'm going to try and keep it at a pretty high level. I know there's some people here who are already product managers. So if you see something and you're really interested and you want me to go a little bit deeper, just raise your hand. I'm really happy to go into it. I'll save the longer questions for the end. But this is a really rough structure. Doing what your customers want is not an easy problem. There's a lot of questions there, and I'm really going to break it down into like a step-by-step and a skills-based approach for what you really want to do if you're trying to build a product your customers want. All right, I'm going to start with this guy. I think he's my boss's 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 boss. That's Jeff Bezos, and this is a quote from his 2017 letter to shareholders. He has really cool letters to shareholders. He writes one every year since 1997, but I'm just going to read it out loud so it sinks in a little bit. One thing I love about customers is that they're divinely discontent. Their expectations are never static. They go up. It's human nature. We didn't ascend from our hunter-gatherer days by being satisfied. People have a voracious appetite for a better way, and yesterday's wow quickly becomes today's ordinary. You cannot rest on your laurels in this world. Customers won't have it. So the first time I read that quote, I got really nervous because I said, wow, how am I ever going to make my customers happy if, the second I build the product they want, they're going to become bored with it? And at a first glance, this is a really scary quote. But if you look at it again, this is actually a really great opportunity. So because your customers are always looking for something better, because they always have something to complain about, you can harness the power of your customers to build a great product. So that's what we're going to do today. If I had to boil down everything I do into one little chart with respect to customers, this would be it. So you notice customers are in here as many times as possible. This is the product development process with respect to customers. So this side over here is what you typically see in a startup. You don't have anything yet. You're trying to solve some type of customer problem, and you need to get something to market. And there's this thing here that I'm going to walk you through in a second, working backwards. You get from the customer to a MVP or a minimum viable product. I'm going to focus on that with you. But I'm also going to spend a lot of time on this part of the graph. And that's what I do every single day. And if you're really good at this, you can spend your entire life doing this. Work with customers, find out what they want, turn it into a product, go back to your customers again, find out what they want, turn it into a better product. It's a cycle that you can do over and over and over again to keep your customers really happy with your product, keep them coming back, keep your business running. This is sometimes called a virtuous cycle. So this is the crux of working backwards. That's working backwards is an Amazon thing. I have to do this in my job. There's actually a document called the Working Backwards document that product managers at Amazon use. And there's also a thing called a PR FAQ, press release, and questions. But the idea is that instead of building a product and then trying to make it meet a customer need, you start with the customer first, you find out exactly what you need, and then you build the precise product that they want. The product space right now is littered with products that seemed really cool, but no one ever wanted to buy them. And that's a mistake that you can make. There's a lot of really cool things that I'd like to create, but just nobody wants them. So this is a structured way to avoid that mistake. And let's break it down a little bit. Who is the customer? If you are a marketer, you might hear this called segmentation. The idea is that you need to deeply understand who your customer is and many different types of customers. So we're going to go into an example with Uber right after this. But you really have to know who your customer is. And sometimes this is really easy. Maybe you are the customer. Does that help you a little bit? I don't know. We'll find out. But really start with who the customer is first. And the second part is, what is the customer's problem, or what is an opportunity that you can solve with your product? And you'll typically understand this by doing the first one. As you start to talk to your customer, as you understand who they are, they're going to tell you things. They're going to say, wow, I was reading those reviews and it was really hard to sort them by positive and negative at the same time. I wanted a pros and cons view. Boom, there's a product idea right there. So you're looking for what is the customer need. And lastly, why does this really matter for them? There are some customer needs that really just don't matter quite as much. People have annoyances. Some people also have really existential product needs. And you really have to justify why should you do this and what's the real tangible, concrete benefit to your customers. You don't want to build a product that solves an annoyance. You want something that's genuinely useful and meaningful to your customers. All right, so let's break into Uber. Before we do this, who here has a smartphone? Pretty much everybody. Awesome. Does your smartphone have a GPS in it? Yeah, pretty much everybody. I mean, if you've got one of these, you have a GPS in it. Who has a credit card here? Okay. And who here has a need to travel to get around in a, let's say, 3 to 10 mile basis? All right, awesome. We have a pretty good idea of who our customers are. You should also be aware that as this group, we likely have similarities among us that not all customers would have, but we'll come to that in a bit. So here's Uber. This is actually their original pitch deck in 2008 when they were called Uber Cab. And I'm not making this up. This is actually the slides that they showed investors. But let's try and map some of the customer needs to the product here. So we just said we all have smartphones. What about this right here? One-click hailing. In a past world, when you wanted to grab a taxi in Manhattan, you had to go like this. And maybe you're hot and sweaty, you have to wave your hand around, desperately hope that someone will see you. I've seen really aggressive hailing too, where you walk out halfway into the road and say, please pick me up. Since we all have a smartphone and we know that it was frustrating to hail a taxi, this one-click hailing is really exciting to us. Another one here that I really liked is guaranteed pickup. If you've ever taken a taxi in New York, you'll know that sometimes if you tell the driver where you want to go, they actually won't let you get in the car because you're not going somewhere profitable or there's a lot of traffic there and they know they're not going to make money. So one thing that Uber found out talking to passengers is that they really wanted a guaranteed pickup, and Uber could offer them that. So here's a little bit of one of Uber's customer segments, passengers. And we didn't go into this earlier, but there's actually a few smaller segments beyond just passenger. There's the late night partier, a kid who needs a ride to school and can't drive a car themselves, or maybe someone who landed in a new city and needs a ride from the airport. Those are all different types of customers, and Uber started with them when they were deciding what product to build. So even further, let's see how can we map some of these smaller segments to these customer needs. Well, ride to school, great drivers. There's a rate your trip feature. You don't want your kid driving in a car with someone who is untrustworthy. And that's a problem that Uber's actually dealt with on their own. But there's one feature that might matter to this customer segment. And the airport pickup. There's a couple ones here, but car services require 1 to 3 hours notice. At most airports, there's a taxi pickup lane, but not always. So if you can just hop out of your plane, turn your phone on, and hail a ride, that makes your life a lot easier. We also don't want to forget that most products don't just have one customer segment. So the product that I work on, Customer Reviews, has one really obvious segment, the shoppers who read customer reviews and want to know, should I buy this product? But there's also a bunch of other segments, and one of them is sellers. So I spend most of my time protecting the integrity of customer reviews, but I also have to remember that the shopper isn't my only customer. I have to do the right thing for sellers. I have to do the right thing for reviewers. And I don't want to forget those customers who aren't my primary customer segment, or those who I thought were my primary customer segment. So Uber really has another customer segment. It's drivers. And you can see how some of the things here map to what drivers would want. The medallion system is really frustrating. Does anyone know what a medallion is? If you want to drive a taxi, you have to pay upwards of $100,000 to get a medallion that you stick on your taxi just for the right to drive. With Uber, you can start driving whenever you want, or Lyft, or any service like that. So don't forget about your other customer segments. And you'll often do this in an exercise where you go and talk to everyone and say, all right, what type of customer segment do I have? Is this the only customer segment that I have? What are other angles I could look at this with? So don't forget about drivers. And an interesting thing is Uber did forget about drivers. So even if you're a great product manager, Dara, used to work at Expedia. He's definitely a product manager. Uber forgot about drivers. And drivers went to this other app that I hope a lot of you use because they didn't like Uber. So Uber had to admit, we're sorry we forgot about this customer segment. We're going to redesign our driver app so it works for you. And they realized that if they didn't have drivers, their riders would become unhappy because there's no one to pick them up. So don't forget about all of your customer segments. All right. So if you think about that little diagram that I had, an even more simplified version of that diagram is just this. There's two great pieces of every business, every product, every new feature. One is deeply understanding the customer need, and two is finding an elegant way to meet that need. We're not going to spend too much time on this one today. I will at the end, but understanding your customer is mostly about understanding the customer need. You have to deeply and intimately know what does your customer want so you can build the right product for them. So we're going to talk mostly about this. This is an awkward word because in the tech industry where I work, empathy is not often a skill that people celebrate. And if you are a product manager, it is a skill that is a must-have. And I read a quote in the New Yorker that said, the one area where Silicon Valley has universally failed is they didn't have enough empathy for the people who their products were affecting every day. And I think in a lot of ways that's right. And empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, is something that is your forte as a product manager. Among engineers, among data scientists, among managers, empathy is a great skill for them too, but it has to be your core. Because you need to understand what your customers want. You are that customer voice. And if you can't live a day in someone else's shoes, you'll never be able to know what they truly need. So I want to unpack this word a little bit so you can understand what it truly means. What I found in a lot of interviews is I'll ask a candidate, what does empathy mean to you? And they just say, oh, it's like living a day in another person's shoes, or I can understand this person's viewpoint. And that's a great surface level understanding, but empathy goes quite a bit deeper. And it goes deeper because of deep-seated psychological phenomena that we are subject to and that we don't truly understand. And if you do, you can be much better at this. So let's just do a quick little exercise. Do you think there's anyone else in this room that is exactly the same as you? Definitely not. I don't think there's anyone here that's exactly the same as me, nor would I want it that way. So you're staring at my face, I'm staring at your face. How do I know what you want? That's pretty hard. I can make a lot of assumptions about what you want. I can look at you, I can see what clothes you're wearing. I can see your body language, maybe you look a little bit nervous, maybe you're hot, something like that. But I'm making assumptions. And assumptions are the kryptonite of product management. Don't make assumptions. You'll have to make assumptions, but assumptions get you into big, big trouble. So this is where empathy comes in. You really don't want to make assumptions. You have to truly live empathy. And sometimes empathy will be painful. You have to listen to a customer who had a really tough story, and you have to feel that customer's story and understand exactly how it influenced them. Sometimes you get a customer who's angry. You built this beautiful product that you're so proud of, and a customer tells you it was trash. That really hurts. And the worst ones to read are when the customer says something about your product and it's fiercely negative, and you know it's right. But you have to be able to understand, why did this customer think that? How did this customer see my product? And how do I turn this into a better product? So empathy is pretty hard. A lot of people, read the dictionary definition and say, yeah, I know what this is, but empathy is not a skill, it's a muscle. It's something that you have to practice. And it will help you not just in product management, it'll help you in many other things. So here's a guy who I would argue is fairly good at empathy. Does anyone know who this is? Yeah, Jack Ma, Alibaba. So he was an English teacher, and now he's a tech tycoon, another billionaire, arguably Jeff Bezos of a different market. And he says, I'm not a tech guy. I'm looking at the technology with the eyes of my customers, normal people eyes. And he's really not a normal guy, but part of the reason he's been so successful, I would argue, is that he really is able to look at all of his products as an average person. He doesn't assume that he's like everyone else who will use his product. He says he has a principle of treating people well, and that's what helped him launch Alibaba in 1999. So you can find examples of empathy all over, but here's a pretty good one. So let's practice a little bit of empathy. When you look at customer feedback, it's going to be something like this: vegetable soup. You can see in that can, letters, a little bit of carrots. I think that's a green bean in there, all kinds of stuff. And it's going to hit you from every angle. Here are some examples of where you might get customer feedback. I've had some pretty interesting examples where I'm walking in an airport in a different country, and I'm casually chatting with someone, and they ask me what I work on, and I say customer reviews. And for the next 45 minutes, I'm listening to how this person read fake reviews, and they were so angry with Amazon. And I was on vacation. I honestly didn't want to spend my time doing it, but that was a real exercise of my empathy. I could have said, hey, sorry, I'm late for my flight, I have to go. But if I truly wanted to, practice what I preach, I needed to listen to this guy and say, I get it. Tell me more about how this went. Like, what went wrong? How did you react to this? It was really tough. So you'll get product feedback in a lot of different venues. Depending on what your product is, you might have some of these and not others. So maybe your product has product forums where your most passionate users will go write about what they think about the product. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have a really small product and your only presence is on Instagram. How are you going to get feedback that way? Maybe people will send you a message, or they'll share it on their own Instagram and say, hey, I really love this product, or wow, I was really frustrated, like this didn't work out for me. And some products also have the luxury of being bombarded with customer feedback. If you work on a very visible product like customer reviews or anything big that a lot of people use, you're going to get so much you don't know what to do with it. But there's also many products where no one's going to say anything. Maybe you just launched your product, no one knows what it is. Who's going to tell you anything about this product? So you might have to look. But product feedback will come to you in many different venues. What you have to do with that feedback is break it down into themes. So depending on how complex your product is, there may be a lot of themes. There may be few themes. But if you listen to 100 different people, they're going to tell you 100 different things. The story is always going to be slightly different. There's a different variable that was present in this story, but not that one. But there will be things that are in common in every story and every customer anecdote. And it's your unique ability to find out what those are. Maybe everyone's talking about customer reviews and, regardless of the story, they all say that it's too hard to sift through them all. One customer said it, they read through every review and it took them 3 hours. Or another customer who said, wow, I wanted to sort through these and, I had to do way too many clicks to find out what I needed. They both told you different stories, but the theme is that they had a hard time processing all that information. So as a product manager, you might have someone who's like a UX researcher or something like this help you, but you need to understand the feedback that you get and break it down into a theme. And you might think that this is just boilerplate here, but there's a reason for that. For every theme that I get, I find it's very helpful to have at least 2 customer anecdotes. I'll talk about customer anecdotes later, but anecdotes are really great at telling a story. And if you say customers were frustrated with reviews because there was too much information, and you're trying to communicate that concept to someone else, they're going to say, okay, I don't really get that. Can you tell me more? So your anecdote is a tool to give color to that story, to put a person behind that story, to make it more real. So as you're collecting themes from this soup of customer feedback, make sure to save a few anecdotes so you can really, truly tell that story. And some customers are great at giving you anecdotes. Other customers just say, I like the product. You take what you get, basically. And as you're doing this, with all these themes, you don't want a theme like, I thought it was good, or I was unhappy. You want themes that are actionable, because when you're collecting those themes, you're always thinking about this, the incrementally better product. This theme that I'm hearing for customers, how does that translate into a better product that my customers will love more, that they really want, that has the features they want, that will make me successful as a product manager. One other thing I want to talk about here is there's some tools to make this a little bit easier. If you work at a big company, which many of you might, you just get overwhelmed by the amount of things coming in. And it's very tough to categorize it all. So there's techniques that you can do to make customer feedback more targeted. And one of them that I really like is called the 5 whys. Has anyone heard of that? You just keep asking why until you get to the root cause. So like an example I have here is the battery is dead. Why? The alternator's not functioning. Why? The alternator belt has broken. Why? The alternator belt was well beyond its useful service life and not replaced. Why? The vehicle was not maintained according to the recommended service schedule. So you got from the battery's dead to you didn't follow the maintenance schedule. And those are 2 very different things. But the real problem is not that the battery's dead, it's that the customer doesn't know how to maintain their vehicle. So if you keep asking, you'll get more useful feedback. You won't get the, I liked it. You'll get the, I liked it because this, and if you did this, it would be better. So as much as you can, try and break it down a little bit more. Another tip that I can give is that when you get customer feedback, you can have an instant reaction to that. A classic example is when you get negative customer feedback. When someone tells you that your product sucks and you've spent years of your life working on this product and you made the decisions that made them unhappy, it's going to hurt. And you might get defensive. You might dismiss their feedback. You might say, this customer's crazy. I know better. I spent so much time in this. I made all the decisions. How could they say that? This is where your empathy comes in again. if you can truly put yourself in the customer's shoes, you can be a neutral listener. You don't prompt the customer with what you think. And you really let them explain it. Don't be afraid of silence either. Don't fill in the customer silence with what you think, because then you'll lead them down a different road than they were originally going to go with you. So a little bit about customer feedback. So here's some real customer feedback. This is not a product that I work on, but this is. Reviews are a cool way to get customer feedback. I'm going to use this example because the Echo team actually does use customer reviews for customer feedback, and they do exactly what I just described to you. They look at 116,000 customer reviews for just this product, and they find themes, and they use them to make a better product. So let's look at what some customers said. And again, some of them are going to be good, and some of them are going to be really harsh. So yeah, if you read this one right here, you're really happy. Wow, my product did something meaningful. I made this person's life better. Then this guy comes in. That's a tough day at work. But yeah, it's going to look like this. And then here's a thank you, I really appreciate that, but that didn't really help me build a better product. So you have to love these, but you have to know that this is actually better than this one. Yeah, so let's do a little exercise with this. You know, if we got this soup, can we make something out of it? And I've only given you the title here, but you know, the Echo Dot turned Alexa into a that salesman. Why? Why were you angry at your Alexa? And you can read their comment a little bit and say, okay, what did this customer say? Is there something I can take away here? Is this common to what other customers are saying? Was there anyone else here who said the same thing? Unpack that a little bit. Or, you know, this useless one. Why do you love it? What worked well for you? What didn't work well? Or this one, the customer who's insulting your product. Don't be defensive. You know, I agree with you. The product isn't that great. You know, tell me how I can make it better. That's a great way to approach those ones. This one is even meaner. The customer threw your product in the trash. I've seen that happen. I used to work on a product where someone made a video of burning the product, shooting it with a gun, and running it over with a tank. And that was pretty hard. But if you practice your empathy, you can understand, why was this customer unhappy? What about the product didn't work for them? How can I turn this unhappy customer into one of my greatest customers who really appreciates my product because how I listened to them and made improvements that made it a great experience for them. All right. So we just went through a lot of anecdotes, and we talked about that soup. And we talked about how that soup could sometimes be a little challenging to navigate. And there's a reason for that. Like, the soup is not meant to be really concise. Like, you will never build the best product with just the soup. So this is how you build the best product. You take the soup and you add some data to it. And together, you can get the product your customers really want. And why you need the soup and the data is that the data is factual information. Like, you can, you know, tell stories with statistics, but not really. It's objective information. There's no true story to it. It just is. And the anecdote is what I like to call the framing value. So you can look at numbers all day. You can look at your product metrics. You can say, oh, conversion is up 10%. But why? So this helps you answer the why. And if you get both together, you can get a really strong story and a great direction to improve your product. So maybe that guy said, you know, the Echo Dot was turned into a D-bag salesman. And then we have some data that says when customers, you know, got that notification, they used their dot less. There's a much better story than just the customer who was angry and gave me that anecdote. So whenever you have a chance, anecdotes and data. And this is hard because, you know, it's easy to collect anecdotes. It can be harder to collect data. So now I'm going to tell you how you can get some good data. Here's an illustration of why this matters. This is your anecdote. It's one person, the emoji girl. and she just told you something about your product, and you think you can go somewhere with that, but you're not sure. How much does this matter? If everyone in this room told me something different about the product, which one is the most important to me? Or how one person told me one thing, and the second person told me something else that was conflicting. Who's right? Or who do I listen to? Or if I listen to both, like which one is most important to focus on now, and which one can I solve later? So the power of data is that you don't just get this one person, you get everybody, or at least a larger sample size to make a stronger case for the why. Don't forget this. Sometimes at a big company, this is going to be larger than you could fit in this entire room. Some of you will be product managers for a product where this is 2 or 3 or 4. So use what you have. And when you talk about data, people have a variety of backgrounds coming into product management. And one of the hardest questions that comes up is, oh, I'm not as technical. How am I going to get this data? And or another one is, I wasn't a software engineer before. How do I understand this tech design, if I wasn't an engineer? And fortunately, with data, this will make you pretty dangerous. If you can take a basic statistics class, or even read about stats on Wikipedia, maybe go to product school. There's a lot of ways to do this, but thankfully it's not that hard. If you understand what a median is, what an interquartile range, like you already have the basic information you need to make good data-driven decisions. So it's really not that hard, and don't be intimidated. The other thing is, don't necessarily learn SQL. Amazon uses SQL to get data. They just throw you a big soup and say, figure it out. When I say SQL, I don't necessarily mean SQL, I mean a way to get the data. So let's say you have a massive database with every customer interaction. You might need SQL for that. But maybe you're a much smaller business and your data is just an Excel spreadsheet. It's not just, well, it really is stats, but it's a way to understand and a way to retrieve. So if you can piece those two together, which neither are very hard to figure out, you can be really dangerous with data. And yes, like at a bigger company, you'll have a data scientist, you'll have a research scientist, a business analyst. You'll have people who can help you with this. But if you're able to do it on your own, or at least approach the concepts, you can make much better decisions. Does anyone recognize this? Know which product this is? Twitter, exactly. So let's see what's going on here. This is an anecdote. Here's someone who's trying to get under the 140 character tweet limit, and they're doing all kinds of strange things. Like, what is this right here? Try-in, you are, you can, you compose. It's strange. Yeah, you could say that's okay. It's the modern world where you shorten everything. But maybe you have a business customer that says, wow, I really didn't like that feature because I had to do things like this, and it made my tweet not professional. Here's another one. This is what you would want to send, but you can't send it because now you're 13 characters over the limit. So this is what most people did. They took a lot of time and carefully worded every tweet so it fit exactly under the limit. So here's our anecdote, and look what Twitter found. So this was a product manager. Her name was Eliza Rosen, and they called this cramming. So shortcut, this is the cramming. So what's happening here is they looked at many different languages, and with each language there's a concept of information density, which is how much can you get in a certain amount of characters. Turns out in Japanese you can get a lot into a little, but with English, like, look what happened here. So this is the 140 character tweet limit, and wow, a lot of people are coming in right under that. People are doing unnatural things just to fit under that 140 character limit. And they also found out that the languages that had this problem more than others had a smaller percentage of users who actually tweeted. So they took that example that we talked about before and they said, wow, this is actually preventing people from tweeting. Like, this is really painful. We should do something about it. So this is what they tried to do. This looks suspiciously like a normal distribution, except for this strange spot. You know, what if we just increase the character limit so these customers who had a really painful experience could just tweet smoothly? So they did that. They increased it to 280 characters, and it was really controversial. Does anyone here use Twitter a lot? Any big Twitter users? Okay, you do? Yes or no for the 280 character limit?
Yeah, yes for that.
Okay, awesome.
I was happy.
You're a great person to ask, but not everyone will say that. So why did I highlight that this is controversial? Because that anecdote that we saw, where the business user was trying to cram words into that tweet, they're not every customer. There are other customers who said you've ruined Twitter by introducing 280 characters because 140 was the ethos of this product. Like you've thrown the product down the drain by doing this. You made people really unhappy. But when you have a tough situation like that, anecdotes plus data, you can make a much better decision. And Twitter did go through with this, and they've stuck with it. And their metrics improved quite a bit. They got more users tweeting. They got higher engagement on every tweet. And it was a happy story. So good example of how you can use anecdotes and data. Here's another awkward word. And it's uncomfortable for product managers because we celebrate success so often. The two quotes I've shown you before, they're both hugely successful billionaires. And this is not something that you practice as a product manager. You give a convincing presentation. You always know the right thing to do for your product. Yeah, humility doesn't come up a lot. But actually, humility is a really important part of being a product manager. So again, Jeff Bezos, that billionaire, he said, people who are right a lot of the time were people who often changed their minds. So is that good or bad? You could say that's a flip-flopper. This person has no conviction. They can't decide. But you also have to remember that as a product manager, you're not paid to get it right the first time. You don't have to come into every meeting and say, I know exactly what we'll build. You don't have to have the perfect concept every time you go into a pitch. It just doesn't work that way. And even the most successful people, it never works that way. So remember to be humble. And one way I've heard this said is voice your opinions with conviction, but be quick to change when you encounter better information, when conditions change. Maybe when you were initially thinking of this product, thing A was really popular, but now it's faded, and thing B is now popular. You need to change. Should you go forward and say, let your pride take hold of you and say, I was right the first time, let's do it anyway, and then fail? No. You should be okay to be humble and just go with it. So do not forget humility. And with humility, I'm going to talk about some really common mistakes that product managers make. I've made some of these, and I expect every product manager will. And some people have made these mistakes at really huge scale. It's okay to be humble. Let's laugh a little bit and see what that looks like. So here's the biggest pitfall that I see product managers make. I know what my customers want because I use the product a lot. I'll just let you look at the picture for a second. It's a cow using I think it's a Fisher-Price toy. And the cow has their head in the Fisher-Price toy. And as you can see, it's not working out. So the cow is the product manager. If you are this cow, you're not going to build the right product because who really uses this Fisher-Price toy? Is there market cows? No, it's kids. So you have to remember that you are not always the customer. And there's actually a real word for this. It's called the false consensus effect. Humans in general have a tendency to think that what they believe is also accepted by the majority. You can look this up if you're interested. It's there's research into this. This is really dangerous, and people do it without knowing. Like when you make a statement, you just naturally think that because I believe this, other people do, when that is not the case at all. So be really careful of this. This can be more dangerous when you are a passionate user of the product. Let's say you're really into gaming and you start a new job at Xbox. You want to be really careful not to project everything you know about gaming onto that product because you're not the only customer. And you may not be a typical customer either. One thing that we constantly have to be aware about in Seattle or San Francisco or New York in a big tech company is that you are very unlike most people who use their product. Amazon actually has a way of doing this. They make more senior leaders take customer service calls. And on my first customer service call, I was trying to be super professional and use all the right words and everything. And I talked to a customer in Kansas City who was really angry that their jelly beans didn't come in the mail and Amazon had delivered them to the wrong location. And the biggest thing I learned from that is I was all hyped up about joining a big tech company, going to my shiny office. And here I am talking to this guy, nothing to do with me, telling me about how his jelly beans didn't show up. And I just realized that I made a lot of assumptions about who my customers were that were not true. So do not forget this. There are exercises you can do. You can go meet your customers. You can actually use your product with other customers to see how they use it. Don't think that you are the customer, even if you use it all the time. Another one is this. This one will get controversial too. I'm a visionary. I know what my customers want more than I do. That one's associated with this guy most of the time, who's a polarizing figure. I would not recommend this one unless you are Steve Jobs. And even if you are Steve Jobs, I would still not recommend this one. And this is why. For every one of these, there's 1,000 of those. Some more painful than others, but for every visionary product that customers loved, the market is littered with those that they didn't. Leave your ego at home. Be humble. Don't forget to talk to your customers. Make decisions in a safer way. I'm going to talk about that next, so that your vision assuredly matches the customer need. Be careful, is what I will say here. If you're very, very sure, test it. But don't blindly introduce something thinking that it's right because you believe so. Here's another really visible one. I spent a tiny bit of time working on the Windows product through a tangential product later. And yeah, this was really painful and a lot of people left. And it caused a lot of damage for that product. Windows 8. And this one, does anyone know what Juicero is? I think it was originally $700, and then they made it $400. It's a juice machine. And some guy on YouTube made a video of putting fruits in a Ziploc bag, and he bashed it with a hammer, and the juice was tastier than this thing. Turns out nobody really wanted a $700 juice machine, even though it looked really cool and some guy had a vision for this thing. So don't fall victim to this. So we talked a lot about deeply understanding the customer need. The truth is that's not all of the story. I didn't tell you about this part quite as much. You could give an entire other talk about that, but I will give you some of the highlights just so you're, if I did get hit by a bus and you had to go in for work with me tomorrow, you could still do this. What if there was a world where you could just listen to customers and then the product made itself? You just listened to exactly what they wanted and then the product was made for you. That would be great, right? Turns out it isn't that way. I think we all know that, but there is somewhat of a science into taking that deep understanding of what customers need and making sure it really is the right product. So I'm going to give you a little overview of that. Remember this little wheel we had? That happens. So how do you avoid that? Maybe you have an excellent understanding of what customers need. You talk to all your customers. You have great data to back it up. Then you took a little while to build a product and something changed. And you launched it and nobody liked it anymore. So what are better ways to meet that customer need in an elegant way with running into this less? And you will run into this even if you do everything right. You have the perfect data, you deeply understood your customers. This will still happen to you. Part of being a product manager is making this happen less, or when this does happen, make it hurt a little bit less than it could have. Does anyone know who these guys are? All right, Airbnb. Joe Gebbia, right? This guy. He gave a really cool talk. It's a podcast, actually. It's called How I Built This. You can just Google How I Built This Airbnb, and you'll hear this quote. So here we are in the living room, and they pull out their laptop. And in those moments, we saw how our perfectly designed interface completely and utterly failed. What we thought took 2 or 3 clicks to get done, people are taking 10 to 12 clicks, stumbling around and getting lost. So these guys all went to RISD, and if you're in the design world, RISD is like the best you can get for design. These guys thought they had a beautiful interface. They talked to customers, everything was great, but when they launched it, it didn't turn out that way. So even the best people, even people who are hugely successful, can fall victim to this. What are some strategies to avoid it? This is one. I would not recommend this one. You can maybe do this for small bets. If it's something that your product doesn't truly depend on, this might be okay. But how about if you're launching a brand new product line and its success or failure is critical to whether your business lives? Are you going to leave it up to a coin flip? Probably not. So these are some common ways. Again, this could be an entire other talk. One that's really popular is this, A/B testing. The theme here is that all these are just safer ways to fail. Failing is okay, but fail when it doesn't matter as much. Fail when the stakes are lower. Artificially lower the stakes so that when you do fail, it'll be okay and you'll learn something from it. Don't take coin flips. One we talked about here in the beginning is working backwards. That's critical to understanding your customers is when you think you know what your customers need, distill that down into the minimum that you think can get you some signal in the market and get it out there and see what your customers say. So here's a really good example of that. Robinhood. Robinhood had 1 million users before they even launched the product. And some companies abuse this. They'll put up one of these pages and say sign up, and then 2 years later you go, hey, where'd the product go? But this is one way to do that. You can get your concept out there and find out without having to build an app, build all the integrations you need to trade stocks. Find out if customers really want that. This is called a soft launch. Here's another one. I've talked about a lot of techie products. Product managers don't all work on tech products. This is a company called Lola. They make tampons. Tampons are hard for me as a product manager because from just what I know, I don't understand a lot about tampons. And that's okay. But let's say I was the product manager for Lola and I wanted a better tampon product for my customers. And one thing I knew from anecdotes is that customers were unhappy when they bought some tampons and they ended up with too many of the wrong size. The box only comes with this many of this size and then this size, and wow, 3 months later I have a huge stash of this size that I don't need. So I say, okay, I listen to that customer. I'm going to introduce a feature that allows me to customize what I get in the box. One way I can launch this is take a coin flip, just put that everywhere and make customers do this and see what happens. I would not recommend that. So what are some better ways? You could do a pilot. You could say, let's let some customers try this. Maybe we have a group of very loyal customers who we know it'll be a little bit safer with. Let's let them try it and see how their experience goes. Or you could do a random A/B test where 50% of visitors get this option. Let's see who's interested in it. You also want to measure whether this actually works. How do we know whether customers actually like this? And I came up with a few ways you could guess. So a customer roughly uses this product every 4 weeks. So we can measure 4, 8, 16 week, how many people leave. Did they like this product? Or were they unhappy and they decided not to continue using my product? I could send them a little survey and say, how happy were you with Lola? And give some like a 1 to 10 smiley face thing and see what people say. You could find out what percent of customers order more of them, or what percent of customers switch back to the regular product, or how many people adjust this breakdown after having done it once. So don't bet your business or your product on one change. Do it in a safer way, measure it, and find out how it actually performs. So we're coming about to time. I've tried to give you a crash course. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, you could roughly go into my job and at least have a framework for how to go about building what your customers want. You'd have some successes and failures too. Like you learn a lot by doing. Sometimes you think you have the perfect information and then it turns out you don't. So then you grow by doing that, and that's okay. This is my best attempt at a crash course. I want to leave it open to you guys for questions. Was there anything you saw in the presentation that you want to know more about? Something you showed up today and you wanted to learn that I didn't cover? Just go for it. Go ahead.
I just want to know how you balance the customer needs and business needs.
Yeah. So where I work, customer needs are almost everything. At Amazon, you don't hear people in the hallway arguing about making money. You hear them in the hallway arguing about what was right for the customer. So that helps me a little bit. But that's a valid concern. Sometimes you can make more money doing the wrong thing for the customer. But what you usually find is that if you bleed the customer for more money by not doing the right thing for them, in the long term, that won't work out. So it's a balance. Usually, though, if your customers are happy, you'll continue making money. So I would say customers first, but then as you launch something, say, does this work for our business? And maybe don't launch things that work great for customers but have no business relevance. One really good example of that is MoviePass. Have you heard of MoviePass? MoviePass was, I would call it charity for movie tickets. I think charged you $9.99, allowed you to go to as many movies as you wanted a month. And turns out customers went to a lot of movies and they were giving movie tickets away for free. And I don't know whether they've officially gone bankrupt, but they're just about bankrupt now. So there's a good example. Prioritize customers first, but always check before you launch, say, does this make sense for our bottom line? And I think you can get that. Let's say you're selling a physical product. Customers would love if you gave it away for free, but there's a balance there. You can't really give your product away for free because then you don't have a business. Does that help a little bit? Go ahead.
You mentioned that for the product you work on, you get a lot of customer feedback. So
Yeah.
Are there some ways you can get that feedback when your product isn't quite as visible?
Sure. Yeah, so if you work at a big company, if you work on a very visible product, you have that luxury of just more feedback than you ever know what to do with. Most people will not be in that position. So what are some great ways to get feedback? Some popular, you should use more than one. And the tenet that I would follow is never miss an opportunity for a customer to give you feedback. So every time you talk to a customer, hey, while we're here, tell me what you thought about this product. Or as you send a customer an email, like a transactional email about their purchase, give them an opportunity to weigh in. Emails are one way, a feedback form at the bottom saying how did we do? Tell us something. And you won't get everyone from that, but you'll get some signal. You can call your customers. Sometimes there's rules for whether you can do that. At Amazon, we don't just call people randomly. But if a customer, let's say a customer had a problem with a product and they're dealing with the support team or customer service, you can say, hey, I work on that product. Would you be willing to talk to me and explain what went right here or what we can do better? And customers are often willing to do that. So take every opportunity you can. You can send surveys. You can do user research. Some very painful ways. You can stand on the street and do it. That's a very humiliating experience, but it sometimes works. You can also pitch it to your friends. Let's say you're in a really early stage and say, hey, I'm thinking about this idea, tell me your thoughts about it. And just leave it open to them. And be cognizant that you're not going to get a fully balanced approach. Like, they're your friends, they're likely similar to you, but it gives you something. So depending where you are, like, there's hustle to query my database. And I would do all of them if you can. Does that help? Cool. Go ahead.
How did you practice empathizing and the thing about not getting hurt when you listen to a customer's story?
The question is, how do you practice empathy and not getting hurt when the customer tells you something unflattering? I did this by inviting myself to go into the worst customer conversations. And this may not work for everyone, but I would find the angriest customer and just listen. And honestly, just let them beat me up. And that was pretty hard, and it hurt my ego a lot. But I thought, I'm practicing this. I really have to think about my unhappiest customer. And one good thing about that is you can make your unhappiest customer happy. You're doing pretty good. So it's not a bad idea to start with those. If you don't like being yelled at, or you're not really ready for that level yet, maybe don't start there. But the one thing I'll say is put yourself in more situations where you have some feedback that you're not prepared for, and self-reflect on how you react to that. Like, when a customer gives you positive feedback, how do you react to that? When a customer gives you neutral feedback, how do you react to that? And have the customer conversation, and then after, take a minute and say, how did that go? How did I respond? And self-reflect there. And really, the secret is practice. It will likely not happen the first time, especially if this product is your child, it is everything to you, and your first customer interaction, they want to throw it in the trash. It's going to be hard, but as you get more of those, you'll learn to take those in a more mature way, to respond with a level head, leave your ego at home, use it as an opportunity rather than as an attack. And remember that customers are not attacking you, it's just your product. And every interaction is an opportunity to do better. So that's how I'd roughly go about it. Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
How often do you release something new?
How often do I release something new? It really varies. I try to release something new every week. Obviously, there will be larger releases and smaller releases. I try to do at least something every week. Some companies will ship multiple times a day, but it's more incremental. What I would say there is as frequently as you can, even if it's not super high fidelity. Ship things at lower fidelity to a smaller audience just to understand how they do. If it's something that is really, really critical to your business, maybe take a little bit more time. So frequently, but as frequent as is necessary to meet your goals. And it'll really vary by what your product is and where you're working. Maybe you're working in the phones business. You don't release a new phone every week. It just doesn't work that way. So physical products will be very different than software products. Software products are really nice, especially web-based products, because you can update them whenever you want, whereas other products will not be that way. Cool. Do you have a question?
You talk about getting a lot of customer feedback.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific framework for prioritizing what to use and influence strategies?
Yeah. Sure. So the question is, you get a lot of customer feedback. How do you prioritize it? And I'll go back to what I said about anecdotes and data. So you're going to have so many anecdotes, you don't know what to do with them. Even if you don't have a lot of customers, you're going to get little nuggets in every interaction. Even just in one interaction, you get 6 different things. And you can't do all of them at the same time. So how do you know? The secret is really data. So everything that you hear, be skeptical. This person told me they really want that feature, but do they really want that feature? And if I launch this feature, what will happen? How many other customers are there that also want this feature? And also be wary that The customers who are the noisiest are not necessarily the majority. So yeah, take your customer feedback, try to find some objective data to back it up, and rank your things based on some formulation you have of what I call impact. So maybe that's the number of customers versus how much revenue they bring in or something like that. Some composite of how much they matter to your product. And it is one of the hardest things to do. Like especially on a product like customer reviews that has a lot of different customer needs at a different time. Like I'm overwhelmed by things that I could do. And I spend a lot of time deciding like what is the one thing that I should do over all these things. And again, really it just comes down to the data. I spend probably 30 to 40% of my job just looking at data to help me make a decision on what I should do versus what I should not do, or what I should do before this, and then what can wait till later. Yeah, I think you could have a whole nother talk on that. That's a really tough topic. Yep. Go. I'm trying to get someone who hasn't asked. Go ahead.
So to follow up the last question, we talked about the data. Is there any way to prevent bias from the data?
Sure.
Was there any situation where like you collect the data, you run the A/B test, but the conclusion being drawn is just a different story?
Yeah. Okay. So do you mean what do you do when the data doesn't match your anecdote, or how do you prevent bias when collecting data?
It's both.
Okay.
Both, I guess. Yeah. Bias will emerge.
Yeah.
The data collection process and also how people interpret.
Yep. Okay. So I'll answer like the conflict one first. What do you do when the data doesn't match the anecdote? That's a red flag. Like I would stop if that happens. Either your anecdote is not representative, maybe your data is wrong, or like you haven't measured the right thing. So that's something to be aware of. I would reconsider your assumptions if that happens. Or just maybe it's not the right thing to do. Like maybe you had an anecdote that said, I want this feature, and then you test it and it performs horribly. Maybe it's not the right feature, and that's a valid conclusion as well. The other one is how do you prevent bias in data? Another mistake that I hear a lot is that numbers aren't biased, or like just because it's an algorithm, there's no bias to it. That's not true. So you have to be careful not to accidentally insert bias into your data. So one way to do this, and one thing that happens to me a lot, is in the customer reviews products, I represent reviewers all over the world, and their behaviors are very different. So I could accidentally introduce bias when in making a decision about what feature I should build, only include US customers. I could build the wrong product for customers in India, customers in Japan, just because I didn't listen to them. And I didn't mean to do the wrong thing for them, but I just didn't include them in the data. So the data told me like, yes, definitively this, but it was biased. So one, make sure your data is representative of all customers. Be careful of excluding specific things that might be convenient to your analysis, and could likely give you the data that you want, but aren't truly objective. And lastly, resist the temptation to use data to tell the story you want. I've done this before and it's convenient, but if you really want to make a point, a lot of product managers will just go cherry pick something from the data that agrees with that point. Don't do that. It can be really tempting, and sometimes it is warranted. Like if you're just trying to illustrate something, that's fine. But if you're making a this or that decision, that's not okay. So don't do that. It will come back to bite you later. Does that help? Cool. Let's see, what time is it? Yeah, I think maybe like one or two more questions. Go ahead.
So kind of along that data line of questioning, when you're in that initial phase where you're still defining your MVP,
Yeah.
I imagine you don't have much data at that point.
Yep.
In that case, what else do you do now before phase?
Sure. So pre-launch, you're not going to have a lot of data. How do you understand whether your MVP is the right thing without, an active product? Yeah, that's a hard one. I'll go back to Robinhood. They did it in one way. They didn't actually launch the product. That's one way to do it. Another way is to pitch your idea to people. You have to be careful not to bias them. Like, you don't want to say, hey, I'm building Tinder for dogs. Don't you think that's a good idea? Yeah, you're not going to get good data for that. But if you start talking about the product and you get organic reactions, that gives you some data. It's not going to give you big scale. Another thing is you could test it among a smaller group. Like maybe your product doesn't have fit in the market yet, but you like at least have some people who use it, maybe a group of employees, a group of friends or something like that. Just get anyone using it. And it might not be perfect data, but at least get you something. Some data, even if imprecise or biased, is better than no data. So yeah, and you're going to have to hustle. If you don't have a mature product and you don't have a lot of customers using it, your data is not going to be as good as a mature product. Like let's say Facebook, which has so much data they don't know what to do with. Like if you're a product manager there, like you have anything at your disposal to make a decision. Whereas maybe Lola Tampon's a much smaller company, they don't quite have that luxury. Maybe like your company doesn't even have a relational database to store customer data. Yeah, so it's going to vary. Yeah.
What tools do you use as a project manager?
As a project manager or a product manager?
Product manager.
What tools do I use? Let's see. I use SQL a lot, and I also use Python. I probably spend around 30 to 40% of my time looking at data. I also use this tool a lot, my voice. Big part of being a product manager is communicating concepts. I use this a lot too, email. For better or for worse, you can get really sucked into email, and a big part of your job is communicating, either upward or outward or among your team. I use some very specific tools to do what I want. So I work with machine learning models a lot. So I'm using specific Amazon tools to train a model or define features for that model. A lot depends on your job. I would say the core skills are understanding your customer, which is this, your brain, and this, your empathy. I would say your communication ability, which is your voice or your writing ability. That'll vary by company. Amazon is a writing company. Some others are PowerPoint companies. And another one is like your analytical skills. So how you can look at data or make good decisions based on what you see. And that's something you'll have to practice. It also widely vary by what you're doing. So I work on customer reviews. I build big systems. Let's say you're working on pricing. Like you're gonna use different tools and have different skills than I would. So it'll depend a little bit.